Welcome to Hot Sauce. I am very excited today to welcome Sacha Dixon. Sacha is a great mate of mine. We've known each other for a couple of years now. Welcome, Sacha. Thank you for joining me for a chat.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. And Sacha, I'd love for you to share a bit about your background. I really like your background because of how rounded your skill set is. You've worked in like bigger agencies, small agencies, run your own shop, worked internal, and now working in embedded. Was that journey kind of like deliberate, or are you just pursuing your passions and as you've matured in the space, just like exploring new opportunities in different spaces?
Yeah, I definitely say it's more, a progressive career progression, if you will. So I started out when I moved to Sydney, which was 8 years ago. I started out with a tech startup, which really got me interested in the realms of tech. I then joined a recruitment agency and did that for a couple of years, working as a tech consultant, oh, not a tech consultant, a tech recruitment consultant, working with lots of different size companies. I was very good. I self-identified that I was very good at the relationship side of things. I really didn't enjoy the cold BD or anything like that. So in the midst of COVID, I decided to take a punt on myself and start my own business. It was buy a house, start a business. Which one do you want to do? And I decided to back myself and did that for a couple of years, which was really great. I got to work with some really cool small companies and some larger companies and help secure some really pivotal talent for them, which was kind of embedded, kind of not. And then at the end of those 2 years, I decided to go internal and try and build my skill set internally. And I ended up with a company called Quilla. I was there for a couple of years. I led the talent acquisition function there, helped them scale for what was meant to be a Series B round, which never came to be, sadly. But I put in a number of best hiring practices and techniques, hiring manager training, and so on and so forth, including implementing in a new ATS, which was really cool. My role was sadly retrenched earlier this year. And I went out to market and I had been aware of the embedded recruitment space. And that's what's really, really driven me. I think I really enjoy being embedded with companies and working on the greater talent acquisition piece. But I think at a scale where I can add impact and move on, add impact and move on. And that's what's led me now to Fulcrum.
Do you find the skill set that you developed when you were working with an agency is like applicable in an internal talent acquisition function, or the role is completely different?
Oh no, I think it's very applicable because your hiring manager is your client, right? And you're still acting as this pivot point between the candidate and the hiring manager. You're acting in the best interest of both to get the best outcomes. I'd say it's very transferable. However, I will say shout out to my first employer, Northbridge. I think I've been very lucky in the way that I was trained from a not internal, from a consulting point of view. I think the best practices that they taught me from the very beginning, I've carried through with me, and the high standards that I was held to there have carried through my career. So I think I've been very grateful. It's not been a just throw CVs at it and see what sticks. I've never operated through that kind of lens. And I think that's what makes it a bit more transferable to internal.
And one of the reasons why I was so keen to have you jump on today and have this conversation is um, obviously this last 12, 18-month period has been really tough for talent acquisition, often the first to be impacted when the macro conditions deteriorate. And as you noted, made redundant from Quilla, and then had been in market for a while, securing a new role. And when we caught up, once you picked up this new role at Fulcrum, we were talking through that journey, and I don't know if you let slip, but you spoke of a spreadsheet that you were running that documented this hiring process. And I'd never heard of anybody running that process before. So I was, keen to explore that idea with you and see if there are any learnings, like takeaways that could benefit others in a similar situation. But tell us about the spreadsheet, please.
Definitely. So just going back to when I started my own business, it was in the middle of COVID, so it's like 2020, and there was so many candidates on the market that were just looking for advice and what do I do? What do I do? So I was doing a lot of conversations, and one of the things I would advise them to do was to make sure they're tracking everybody they're applying with, everybody they're speaking to, so that they're never caught off guard. They're always prepared to answer the questions if they get a phone call or whatever it is. Put their best foot forward. So following my redundancy in February, I decided to do the same thing, and I set up just a Notion doc so that I could track who I was interviewing with, who I'd applied to, and what kind of correspondence I was having with them. So that was mainly so that I could be most prepared for what was going to be a month of job searching, essentially. But it's turned out to be, I guess, an accountability record for myself as well, because I now have this new lens of I've been the candidate in these tough times that has been going through multiple candidate experiences, and what can I take away from that as a consultant to make sure that I'm doing the best thing by my candidates moving forward so that they don't have perhaps an experience that I've experienced.
Amazing. I think that empathy lens, I think it's easy to forget that. I haven't worked internal, but when I worked in agency, I feel when you're in the kind of like the hustle of trying to find candidates to place jobs, you forget that there are people on the other end and they've got lives and families and kids and hobbies and whatever, and moving people between jobs is a huge consideration. And even just like when market are tight and there's not too many opportunities around, the communication back into those candidates and keeping them abreast of developments, both good and bad, is really, really important. And I think that's awesome, the lens of which you'll view this, and then that you haven't forgotten about it. Because I think sometimes like people have shitty experiences, and then as soon as they pick up a role, that's forgotten. So you've kind of like taken stock and are looking for ways to take those experiences and then adapt how you engage with candidates in the future.
Yeah, definitely. So I've had a look at, the numbers that I came back with and the experiences that I've had, and have sort of identified what it is that I thought were issues in my perspective, or things that sort of made the candidate experience not as great for me. So I do have a couple of numbers I can run through
Yeah,
here
you do.
if
I
you'd
was going to
like.
ask that. Awesome, please.
So overall, I applied for over a 4 week period. I applied for 21 different companies. So applied or was introduced to 21 companies. Um, Over that time, I received 5 rejection emails, and those were, I didn't have any correspondence with them, but they sent me an email. 6 of them I just never heard back from. I did interview with 9 companies. Of the 9 companies I had, within this 4 week period, 21 interviews and 2 task rounds. So that's essentially 23 interviews, not to mention
Wow.
all the micro interactions that happen in between that to make all of that come to life. Um, I personally rejected 5 companies, or 5 roles, not companies per se, 5 roles that were not suited to me for varying reasons. I was rejected by 3 companies. I accepted 1 role. So those are some stats that I took away from my experience. Yeah, I've definitely got some learnings of the things that I would have liked to have seen from a few of those companies that I interviewed with.
Oh, amazing. Yeah, please, if you're willing to share, I feel there's a bunch of people that could benefit from this.
Sure. So I think one thing that I really missed was the lack of personalization. From a candidate perspective, I didn't really have anybody in my corner. There was only one company where I got to work with somebody who sort of mapped out what the steps would look like for me. It was sort of going in blind for a lot of the organizations, not really knowing what the set timeframes were, or what interviews were coming up next, what it looked like. There was nobody really guiding me through that process, which is something that I try to do myself, but I think it was something that I was really missing. There wasn't a lot of clear and consistent communication. I will say that sometimes I went days and even weeks without correspondence. One company that rejected me, it took them 3 weeks after my final interview to give me a rejection, which came without feedback. And then I had another company that rejected me 2 weeks after, which did come with feedback. Um, but that was 2 weeks after I'd finished and that wasn't an expectation that was set either. So I was just in limbo. And anybody that's had any time speaking to me will know that I will say limbo is the worst place to be. I'd rather know if it is or it is not, rather than sit in limbo. So that was really personally quite challenging for me. I think something else that was quite evident throughout this process was the lack of interviewer knowledge. So sitting down with people that didn't quite understand why it was that we were sitting down to talk. Maybe it was just a conversation. I got the feeling that, we were generating conversation just off of what was happening at the time versus it being a set agenda or a scorecard that they were looking to tick to assess my suitability for the role. So it left a bit of ambiguity there. And finally, leaning back into that scorecarding, receiving feedback throughout the process that wasn't delved into. So I think from here, I'd say, just to summarize some of the issues, no communication or inconsistent communication, the lack of personalization, which I guess depends on the organization and the time that they have to invest. Lack of interviewer knowledge and potentially a misalignment with scorecarding, and again, feedback aligned with that scorecarding and the interview that was conducted. And look, this is my lens from a candidate perspective looking in, and I could have the complete wrong end of the stick here, but these are just my observations, right?
But that feels somewhat consistent over those 21 companies that you applied for. Like they're not anomalies.
They are, yes. They are quite consistent, and there was some really great standout companies in there. There was some companies that did things really, really well. And this is just more so, how can we improve as TA? And all of the things I've listed there are not things that I am completely guilt-free of. These things I've done in the past. And these are like to hold myself accountable to make sure these things are not happening in my process moving forward, because it doesn't feel great.
Well, looking at this with a positive lens is like two things jump out at me immediately. One is like these are very solvable by
Yes.
improving comms between these three groups. And secondly, if you are able to solve for this as a TA, there's a huge opportunity for you to stand out in building your brand as a TA, but also the employer brand of the organization and unlocking referrals and word of mouth opportunities. So like that part's exciting. From a motivation standpoint, or like obviously the empathy lens is like we should be better because it's the right thing to do and it's will drive better outcomes. But like, are there business objectives that are solved for by increasing, like from your experience, like relating it back to this experience, that could be improved upon off the back of a better candidate experience?
Definitely. So there is definitely a business impact for a lot of these companies. So I've actually got a link that I was sent that was about Virgin Media. And I think in 2017, they were reporting on how they lost 5 million annually through bad candidate experience. So to read from the LinkedIn, if there were 123,000 rejected candidates each year and 6% of them cancelled their monthly Virgin Media subscription, you'd end up with 7,500 cancellations, multiplied by £50 or $60 subscription fee for 12 months. They realised that they'd lose £4.4 million, sorry, not dollars, £4.4 million per year, the equivalent of $5.4 million. And I think that's absolutely insane. Just for, potentially not providing a fantastic candidate experience or even a good candidate experience. It doesn't even have to be fantastic.
Yeah, and I feel particularly for consumer brands, if you're pissing off, like, and in some roles, like you're talking of like applications in the hundreds, if you have to piss off 499 people to make one person happy, and you're a consumer brand, and these people are either customers or potential customers, yeah, the revenue impact from there, the brand impact would be huge. So yeah, there's like, I guess, plenty of motivation for the individual and the business to be driving better outcomes.
Absolutely. And I think there are lots of things that we can do and implement that are some of them low hanging fruit, some of them are a bit more high maintenance and involve high touch, but there are lots of things that we can implement as TA people and hiring managers just to make that candidate experience a little bit better. And I'm only talking about from the application process, because I cannot stress enough, candidate experience is so wide a genre. It would be so hard to cover it in this one sitting. It starts from brand recognition in your EVP and all throughout the business, but talking specifically from the point that they have applied or been sourced in the process. I think there's a lot that we can do that is low-hanging fruit in some respect.
Man, this makes me think about a mate of mine and very well known in the candidate experience space, but Steve Gard and his product benchmark CS. Did you ever come across any like candidate surveys during or post process to like help feed some of this information back into the TA teams?
Yeah, so throughout the 21 companies, I received
Here's
one.
The spreadsheets back out.
I got the numbers next to me. I had one candidate experience survey, and that came right at the end of the process after I'd been rejected. So that was
Yeah,
only at the very end, but that was great. At least I got one.
yeah.
And one company verbally asked for my feedback. That was it. That was the all of the surveys I was sent.
Are there any other like material things that TA can do in your eyes that could really help assist in delivering a more consistent and like memorable candidate experience?
I think your ATS is absolutely your best friend, and it does depend on the limitations of your ATS, but you can set up templates for your emails, and I use Ashby at the moment, and you can actually automate each piece of the recruitment process. So application received sends an email, they move into rejected phase if I'm going to reject them. So you can put on auto rejections for certain criteria that is an absolute non-negotiable. And you can, when you're going through your screening, you can, just click a button and off it goes. And you've picked your criteria because you filled out your templates, so on and so forth, all throughout the process as well. Something that I've done since Quilla and I've now implemented at Fulcrum is also a candidate experience survey, 3 layers, one that is sent after any kind of interview with myself or with a TA, one is sent if they're not successful, and one is sent if they are successful. So like tiered so that we can learn what it is our candidates are liking about our process and not liking about our process. And I think using tools actually like yourselves, and this comes, prior to the application process, but using Attract AI for the nurture piece where, you're reaching out to these candidates and they might not be immediately suitable or available, but you want to put them in your nurture so that even every 6 months you can reach out to them. 2 years ago, I went to buy a house, and 2 years on, I still get the same real estate agents calling me. I'm clearly in their nurture place somewhere. They've still got me on a hit list, and I feel like these are the things we can set up for us that tick along in the background that we don't really have to worry about, that give our candidates a much better experience. And I think finally, just closing the feedback loop. And if you say you're going to do something, try and deliver on it. So if you're going to give feedback in a week, give feedback in a week. If you know you're not going to get feedback within the week, tell the candidate, hey, you're not going to hear from me for a week because of X, Y, and Z. You'll hear from me here. And I think it just removes that limbo land and gives you okay, I know what to expect. Oh, okay, I know what to expect.
Most definitely. And one thing you said around the surveys, which I think is interesting, is the delivery points of those, that it's not just like at the end, and it's not just targeting the successful candidates and not just targeting the candidates that were unsuccessful. But I feel like as you progress through that journey, like taking the temperature through the journey can be interesting in terms of determining which parts of the process you need to prioritize, or where you're tripping up.
And that gives you data to go back to your hiring team with as well. And I think I mentioned earlier on in the process, I did sit in interviews at times where I didn't feel like either of us knew why we were in this interview or what was to be achieved. And I think this is something that can come out through candidate experience surveys. You can get to the nitty gritty of, what was working well with a hiring manager, what wasn't working well, what parts could have been improved. And I guess that leads me on to, if you have the time, or if you can prioritize the time, doing interviewer training and hiring manager training so that everybody knows what is expected at the business level for an interview, what their roles are, and setting that out in the briefing call at the beginning of any new role that is being briefed in. So making sure you're clear on the scorecards, what each interviewer role is, what you're expecting of them, and what part of the scorecard you want them to be addressing in that interview, so that you come out and, one, it reduces biases, two, the candidate should have had a great experience because you are getting assessed and they are getting assessed on key criteria that everybody's aware of. It takes time, it takes planning, but it just creates a better experience overall, in my experience.
And maybe I'd love to get you on another time to talk through this scorecard idea. I feel there's I've definitely spoken to a few people that do the scorecarding, but not a huge amount of people. So yeah, some more context around that would be cool.
Definitely.
Amazing. Well, thank you for sharing the spreadsheet, going into the depth around your experience, some of the learnings out the back end, the impacts, and then also providing some solutions. I'd love to share your spreadsheet. Hopefully, that could be valuable to people in a similar process. One from like a documentation, organization, accountability standpoint, but also from a learnings standpoint. I think it seemed like it delivered a lot of value for you. So hopefully others can derive value from it. So we'll work out how to share that when we release this. But thank you so much. Really appreciate you taking the time, going into the depth, presenting the data, providing the spreadsheet. Great to chat.